Welcome to Rock Talk, the official podcast of Rockhurst High School in Kansas City, Missouri, where we explore the voices, values, and vibrant life of our Jesuit college prep community. Hosted by the admissions and marketing team, each episode features conversations with students, faculty, alumni, and special guests as we share stories of academic excellence, faith formation, brotherhood, and service. Whether you're a prospective family, a proud alumnus, or simply curious about what makes Rockhurst unique, this is your inside look at life at the Rock. Hello, everyone. Today, we are excited to welcome Assistant Principal for Student Life, Chris Bosco, to kind of talk with us a little bit about that idea of welcome and brotherhood that you heard from our SGA leaders about last week. Mr. Bosco's main focus on campus is not only just student life, as in clubs, activities, co-curriculars, but also looking at how we wrap around services for our students through our counseling department and some of the work they do there. Thanks for coming today, Mr. Bosco.
Thank you for having me. Hello, and hello, everyone.
Great. So, as I said, our theme for this set of 4 podcasts is the idea of welcome and brotherhood. And, you know, we're just moments away. We record these podcasts a little in advance, but next Monday, the 18th, is our kind of kickoff for the freshmen, our orientation. So, take us back. You know, how are some ways we welcome our incoming freshman class? How do our upperclassmen kind of play a part in that? And kind of what do you see as a value of some of the things we have in place?
Yeah, there's a lot of programming that goes into that process of welcoming the freshmen. And we're talking about freshman orientation, and truly the process began back in the spring. And even over the winter, I think there were, it's called something like signing days, where incoming freshmen were invited to come in and have like a little special time as they accepted their acceptance into the school. And then in the freshman registration night with freshmen and their parents, that was, I believe, in April of last year. And part of that was hearing from administrators and some other key people about that transition of ending middle school and working towards the summer and working towards being here as freshmen. And we're drawing close to that point now. But then we also took the freshmen out of that setting, and we moved them over to kind of a fun side where a bunch of upperclassmen were prepared to give them kind of a Rockhurst welcome, peer-to-peer, with loud music, drums, and some other sort of silly fun. And it's a great night because what the upperclassmen are trying to do is give every student who is there wondering, is this a place for me? What's this going to be like? Am I going to know anybody? Am I going to make friends? What am I going to do?
Yeah.
Can I do this? Like, am I going to make it here? And we give them lots of examples of students who are just a few years older, kind of stepping forward and saying, here are all the things that I'm doing. Here's how I did it. You can do it too. There's a place for you. You can be just like me, but you can kind of write your own way too. So from that moment in the spring, there's the freshman summer social that occurs in June, which is really just getting the young men on campus and having some fun together. And there's a lot of upperclassmen involved in that. Then freshman orientation coming up is really, I think, where we say, okay, you're ours now. You're truly ours now. And we've got a whole day plan of how we want to introduce you to important people. And that includes each other, not just the adults in the building, but we want them to start establishing and frankly, by this time, reinforcing relationships that they have with peers, and kind of get them into the system that will start on freshman orientation day and then continue all through freshman year. So they'll be able to walk through their schedules with upperclassmen showing them around. They'll be able to hear from the academic assistant principal, the dean's office. They'll get to meet with their counselors. They'll get to meet with upperclassmen brothers who will kind of be ushering them throughout the day, but also having opportunities to talk to them about transition topics. How do you make friends, for example?
Right.
What's it like being a student in an all-boys school? What do I do for lunch? You know, sometimes as adults we think of these like really like broad conceptual things. Well, we're going to talk to them.
Right.
Freshmen on the first day of school, give them time. They just want to know, like, where is my classroom? Am I supposed to be seated in the front of it or in the back of it? And so as orientation goes, it's really just trying to break through all those kind of scary moments. And by the time they leave, okay, yeah, this is my place. I feel comfortable here. It's more comfortable. First day of school comes, yeah, there's jitters. they'll understand, like, okay, I know what's happening. As we tell the brothers and train them for freshman orientation, the goal is to be as welcoming and inclusive, and the goal is to make the freshmen feel comfortable. They are welcomed here. They have a place here, and that there are lots of resources around them, including each other. For any questions, let's see what's going on.
So, way back when I was a freshman, I remember the experience that I had, because at the end of the day, I was fortunate. Not all of our students go to Catholic schools, especially now. The population is growing increasingly from, different schools than, the Catholic schools. But I came in familiar with guys, whether it was through sports, classmates, all of those things. And now being on this side of it, I'm curious, when I hear you saying all of this stuff, how much thought has gone into making sure our freshmen come into Rockhurst prepared to have as much success as possible? Like you just mentioned, I'm just listening to you and, the conversations Beth and I have had. And it's like, oh man, I wonder how much, like at what point, one, had it changed over the years, but like at what point do you start even thinking about, hey, we need to make sure we have this, we need to have this thing in place, we need to make sure this doesn't become a barrier,
right? Because
coming into this environment can be intimidating, but
sure.
How much thought and planning goes into that freshman experience?
That never stopped. I mean, we're already thinking about, we assess how things are going in one year. We're always thinking, okay, and how might we want to consider doing that differently next year? It's the constant part of our reflection. Try to bring to everything, like students to do that, so we should model that as well. We start conversations in the spring, for sure. I also work in our summer activity program, so we have a lot of incoming freshmen on campus for various coursework or camps as well. And that process starts in December of the year before they even get here. When we're talking about orientation, those plans take place in the spring as well, and then they really start cooking over the summer when people have time. And as before, we're just looking at, okay, how did this event go? This portion of the event go the year before, the years before. I'll give you an example. It was only a couple of years ago that we started doing a welcoming mass in which we invited the parents to that, instead of just having the freshmen walk in at the appointed time and then be told to go to a classroom. And they're going to go to a classroom, and they're going to hopefully find it. And if they need help, we'd have people along the way. But I mean, it was kind of like that solitary walk of, this is what you experience, right? Go to the classroom, you can find it. And that awkward moment of not wanting to look at anybody, right? It's almost like, a dance where you're along the side of the wall. Like, I don't want to call any attention to myself. But we realized we were missing an opportunity there to not only make that first experience better, but also to invite parents to it. And so a couple of years ago, we added freshman welcoming student mass with parents to it. And now they're walking up those McGee steps, which I think is a powerful image in itself, right? See them walk up those steps. For some, it's the first time they've stepped foot on campus. That sounds crazy to think, but for some, it really is. Not for most. We have some students who only learned about Rockhurst maybe a couple months ago. We have other students, a couple days ago, yes. But then we also have a large group of students who have been thinking about Rockhurst, knowing about Rockhurst, told about Rockhurst, from early age. So how do we create a moment in which all of those and their parents are like, no, we're welcome, we're part of this community, and we're happy to be here. It doesn't matter if you're coming from north of the airport or south of 199. Everybody has that place if they want to be here. And so the mass, now we have the students walking down and sitting with a parent or two, and it's just a beautiful moment. And then celebrated in the sacrament itself. And then after that, of an hour, they get they get a little bit of a talking from Dave Laughlin, our president, and a couple other people that'll say some welcoming things. But at that moment, that's when we ask the freshmen to then say goodbye to your parents and to start walking to your classroom. And as they come out of the Rose Theater, where we'll have that mass, I can now say this because it's will be released after freshman orientation. That's when the upperclassmen and Student Government Association will be banging the drum and, giving them more of a peer-to-peer welcoming, right? And then ushering them to the class where they'll continue activities. It's just a far different experience.
Yeah. I think one thing both Chris and I can attest to is that since Mr. Laughlin, our president, has been back at Rockhurst, one of the driving forces really behind this idea of welcoming students well before they actually are freshmen. And so my predecessor, Mike Comiskey, and I, when we first started here at Rockhurst 6 years ago, one of the first things we talked about was, what does that spring of 8th grade year look like for these students? And how do we make that obviously known that they're wanted here, they're welcome here? And so over the years, and I'm going to give some credit to some other schools, we've begged, borrowed, and stolen some really great ideas. One of which you mentioned, that ceremonial signing that we do right after their admissions letters go out. And that I actually picked up from Cristo Rey High School in Los Angeles. We were at a Jesuit schools colloquium, which is a meeting of all the Jesuit schools in the nation.
Sure.
And we got to visit their Cristo Rey High School. And they do not only a high school signing for every kid that has made the choice to go to Cristo Rey, but they do one for every student who's graduating, no matter where they're going on to next. So if they're going to college, great. If they're going to trade school, great. But they celebrate each student's success. And I thought that was really cool. And it didn't have to be because they were playing sports. It was just, we're proud to have you as part of our community, and we're proud to send you out from our community. So you really like that.
By the way, a whole nother podcast would be talking about the Jesuit Schools Network, that system.
Yeah.
There are so many opportunities that we have as a school on the whole, but also individual departments and different levels within it, from assistant principals, teachers, to the president and the board, to be able to look at what other schools around the country, and really frankly around the world, but other Jesuit schools are doing that are not that different from us. Yeah. And the amount of wonderful communication and ideas that get shared that way is really an asset. Yeah.
And then for the summer social, we actually stole that from Cascia Hall down in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I had gone to visit my cousins down there, and their son was entering 6th grade there because they start their upper school in 6th grade. And he had just gotten back from what he called his summer fun day. And I said, well, what's a summer fun day? And he kind of told me about it. And I thought, well, this is something I think our upperclassmen could really get behind. And let me tell you, this year, Steve joined us in July. So I was running it solo this year for the first time ever. And the squad of upperclassmen leaders was outstanding. And I could not have done that event.
They really enjoy it.
Yeah.
I think for them, they like it because they've been away from campus for a couple of weeks. The exams are finished, and now it's like, oh, we can come back and have some fun. And then our guys, I think they recognize the value, the importance of being leaders, and okay, it's our turn now to welcome in these freshmen. Yeah, for sure.
And these guys were the first ones to experience that summer social too. So it's kind of like full circle. So that was cool. So we've talked a little bit about how we welcome them leading up to and at orientation, but so much of the freshman experience continues on through that first year. So I know one of our major efforts in the last several years has been to develop the Cura program, which Mr. Bosco oversees. So can you tell the folks at home a little bit more about what the Cura process is and what that program is and why it's here, what it's designed to do?
Yeah. Well, like a lot of schools, we kind of recognized years ago that how we're this whole topic is about how we are transitioning freshmen into the community and learning our expectations and trying to set them up for success. Just trying to rethink how that process works. Our teachers do great work in the classroom, but recognizing, okay, what on top of that can we add to the freshmen as they're kind of getting ingrained into the community? So we started off several years ago with a freshman small group program that was happening at the same time as the freshman seminar program. Freshman small group, pretty simple. It's meeting in small groups with their counselor on a regular scheduled basis and discussing a lot of different topics related to the high school transition. Everything from social matters and communication to academic tips and strategies, including hearing from upperclassmen that come in. And then some of the other things as well, just like saying, if you need resources, here they are. And most important to all of the freshman small group was that the counselor was establishing relationship. with the students. The students got to know the counselor immediately and with some regularity. Freshman seminar, Matt Darby likes to say it's all the things, he's our dean of students, all the things that I want freshmen to know, but I just haven't really had the time beforehand to be able to tell him. So I have a toolbox, and I'm just putting those tools in the toolbox by being able to meet with the freshmen on a regular basis and discuss these things, or to bring outside people. And like myself, for example, I talked a couple times. Well, that eventually became the Cura program when we added a third component just about, maybe 4 years ago, I believe. It was coming out of COVID and recognizing that, it's like so many things that were changing, so many needs that were changing, coming out of COVID. Connection, face-to-face connection, relationship connection, trying to, everybody is going to reestablish what normal is, right? We remember that. So the Cura program really began then, in the sense of now most B days, which is, we have a rotating schedule, an A and a B day. And so most B days, all our freshmen come in 45 minutes, 8:15, and we divide them up into 3 groups. And a third of the freshman class will be meeting with their freshman small groups with their counselors.
Oh.
A third of the freshmen will be meeting with the dean or his guests in freshman seminar. And then a third of them will be meeting with Beth and Tyler Baker to discuss the Camino project. Camino is looking at what we call the graduate at graduation, the values that we hold for all of our students, that by the time they graduate, they will be on the road, well on the road, in fact, towards attaining, towards reaching the 5 ideals of the grad, the open to growth.
Would you mind just for the listeners, will you go ahead and just tell us what those 5 are?
Yeah.
In case people are confused.
Absolutely, yeah. And this has been around Jesuit schools for several decades. I believe this came out of a Jesuit conference in the 70s. Could be wrong on that. So if there's any Jesuit listening to me right now, direct your calls to Beth Van Dyke. We'll put it that way.
Don't call me, please.
Not Steve, yeah. So by the time a student graduates from a Jesuit high school, they are on the road towards being open to growth, loving, religious, we say committed to justice, and intellectually competent. I've been here, this is my 25th year starting, and since I arrived, that was the first thing that students hear about then, and it's what they hear about now. And in the Cura program, and specifically the freshman Camino portion of it, that's when freshmen will meet as a group and be able to hear from people that are invited in to talk about, what does that mean, open to growth? What does that look like to a freshman? What does it look like as a freshman practicing that value of being open to growth? So it's not a talking to as much as it's trying to get the freshmen to reflect, like, where am I seeing this? Where do I have the opportunity to do this myself? Where am I maybe not meeting that expectation? Where am I not practicing being open to growth? Where can I change that in the future? And that's called the examen, by the way. And that's a whole other topic too, but that's part of Ignatian spirituality, is to be practicing that sense of reflection, to say, what are the things that are happening? What are the voices that are happening in my experience? What am I listening to when I say voices? Are they leading me in a good way, or are they leading me in a not so good way? And what are the graces that I am seeking to make improvements? And so we have those opportunities for freshmen to hear about that with regards to the grad at grad, and then they begin to map out what they consider as their artifacts.
Gotcha.
What are their things that they can point to and say, you know what, here's where I'm already practicing being open to growth. And then what the Camino Project does over 4 years is try to give them a portfolio of sense that they can show that growth in those 5 different areas over 4 years. And they can not just know that themselves as an important point of reflection, but they can also share that with their peers, their families, and the outside world. And that's an exciting, project that's occurring.
And so help me out, because I had a very interesting conversation at lunch. And for folks listening, at a place like this, you have a lot of interesting conversations with a lot of different folks. And it was about the Rockhurst. I call it the Rockhurst man. But it was in relation to, as we've been doing this orientations for the last 7 days, I think, for me being new.
You've been through it.
Right. Got to interact with the student panel. Then we had our SGA come, to all the faculty. Couple to the all faculty. and we were talking about how I was just always impressed and appreciate how well spoken and thoughtful our young men are. You have a conversation with these upperclassmen, some of them juniors, some seniors, and they can actually have a dialogue with you as an adult in thoughts and opinions, and knowing that that's where they're heading when they leave. Where or how have you seen, the program, whether it's Camino, Cura Personalis, impact those young men as they grow? Like, okay, you hear it, you deal with it freshman year. Yeah. Like, when do you see the light bulb go off?
Yeah, you're touched on something that like really is near and dear to me, and it always has been. At Rockhurst, we have high expectations. We want students to feel challenged to be more of what we believe they're called to be, they're created to be by God as a gift. So we have those expectations, but we also give them the opportunities to practice it. Like, it's not enough just to say, this is what we want for you, or this is what we want you to want for yourself. We're going to give them the opportunities to go through that experience of recognizing I'm developing it, or, I'm not developing it, I might need a little bit of help. And so those students that you talk to, those were guys who've had opportunities to own their experiences that they have when they've been asked to do something, or if they say they want to do something, whether that's on a athletic field and owning, what it means to be a member of the team, and having to have the responsible leadership to perform, to meet expectations, and to put in the hard work and to bring people along with them, or in a club, or even in the classroom when it comes to saying, like, we expect more. And that's not a threat. That's more like a wonderful invitation to say, let's do it together. But I think what you're tapping into are just moments when our students are not just told, hey, I think I want you to think about what would you say to these new faculty and staff as they're coming in. Now, we're going to give them lots of opportunities, even as freshmen, to get in front of one another and talk about things that are important, things that excite them, and then develop that over 4 years. So going back to the freshman Cura program, how is that like a stepping stone, or like a beginning step towards what you experienced last week with some upperclassmen? Number one, I said relationships. The freshman Cura program, I think at the top of everything else, it's all about forming relationships with peers and adults, and recognizing, like, I like these people, I know these people. I mean, I get along really well with all of them. Of course, it's a real world out there. However, we recognize that we're brothers. We recognize that we're Rockhurst students with each other, and they kind of start forming that relationship, and then friendships kind of ensue from that. Adult connections that occur in the freshman Cura program, similar manner of kind of recognizing, like, I see that teacher a lot because she's helping with, she comes into the Camino project and she's reviewing, what we're talking about, and that just kind of sparks that opportunity for him to develop that communication back and forth with an adult. I think what I hear from students who visit from other schools, what I hear from new teachers who might be coming from other places, is just kind of recognizing that our students feel really comfortable being here. They feel like when they're having conversations with their teachers, of course they respect them, but they also recognize, like, it's fun to be in the classroom. You hear from students, we call them shadows. I don't like that term, but it's just me. I'm losing that battle for 25 years. Our guest 8th graders, when you ask them about their experiences shadowing, one of the things that they'll often say after they talk about how much they enjoy the food.
That's true.
Yeah. Ice cream goes a long way. Frozen yogurt, though, that very few people recognize. When you ask them, though, about the day, what they enjoyed, after they say food, they say, well, the classes just seem like different. What does that mean to say the classes seem different? Well, what's different is that there's a bunch of brothers in that classroom, and the teacher has a role in there to teach and to guide and to direct and to challenge. There is that authority and respect. But the teachers are enjoying that experience as much as the students are. And that community, I think, is found in those classrooms as much as it's found in a club, which is a voluntary experience, or an athletic experience. Maybe, Steve, you can talk about that, kind of going through that as a student.
Yeah. Go ahead, Steve.
And my mind is swirling over there, but it's the enjoyment of the process and being in the building is where we were at, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know. I get emotional about it. I'm trying to center myself a little bit, because it's true.
Yeah.
You know, when you talk about the thing that jumps out at me when you're saying that, and it's really close to my experience, is when we're talking about forming those relationships and those relationships creating this environment that we're in. That was one of the things that I can't shake. Before I was in this role, I was preaching that to the high heavens to any young man or family considering coming here, because those were the things that no matter what I was going through, and I was going through a lot when I was here, I always felt comfortable. Yeah. I always felt like if I needed to talk to them, not that I did, but if I needed to talk to somebody, I knew I could.
Right.
If I was willing to share or say something, that people would listen, they would support me, and they would pick me up. And it's cool to see that still happening. I don't know who was saying that today when we were talking, but it was talking about Rockhurst evolving but not changing.
Yes.
That I hopes that lasts for another 100 years, because part of the success that we're able to create is young men coming into the same environment, the same expectations, the same love, the same all of that. And, you know, you call giving opportunities to grow and learn and, hey.
And make mistakes.
Right. You know, I think of grace.
Absolutely.
You're not coming in here and being smacked over the head, if you will, when you are acclimating to such a impactful environment. And I call it impactful in hindsight, but I know being young, it could seem intimidating.
Yeah.
You're coming in with a lot of guys coming from a lot of different places. You're coming in with a lot of guys that are good at a lot of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
You know, you're coming in with teachers that are really good at what they do and have expectations. And at the same time, you were afforded and are afforded room to be a young man growing into yourself.
Yeah. Which, by the way, is not predictable.
Right.
There's not a written book on what my life will be, you know, when I'm 14, what it's going to be by the time I'm 18. And that's the real world that it's not predictable.
100%.
And I think given the young men that opportunity to explore what interests them, and also maybe even like accidentally stumble into things like, oh my gosh, the juggling club was like a really big deal here back in the teens.
You said the juggling club?
The juggling club.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. There's a shout out there. Like that was the most absurd thing in the world. That suddenly the Barry Commons was a place that you had trouble walking through during activity period because there were bowling pins, plastic ones, thank God, and juggling balls and rings and everything else flying around of these kids that were juggling. Not many of them ever thought about being a juggler when they first stepped foot in Rockhurst. But somehow, because they kind of formed some relationships with some friends who were like, yeah, let's check this out. And they felt that comfort to be able to goof around a little bit at first. But suddenly, 3 years later, they're running the juggling club. And in our mission as a school, what I loved about that story too is that like they're going to go to a nursing home and they're going to perform in front of the residents. They're going to go to schools and they're going to perform. They're going to meet up with the improv club and do 2 shows a year in which they take the proceeds of that and donate it to an organization that they of their choosing that they feel strong about. And the beauty of all that is they're taking that risk of I don't know anything about this, but why not? They feel comfortable enough to be able to do that, and they do that together, and they get challenged by it. But they have that sense of like resolve, that resiliency. That's a big important word, right? But they keep kind of moving in that direction of like, I'm just going to keep kind of honing my craft at it because they're falling in love with something. And then as they're doing it and they're enjoying it with the people they're doing it with, they suddenly start dreaming even bigger, which is like, we could put on a show. We could raise money if we put on a show. And then we could take it to a local place that we volunteer at, for example. There's a lot of examples of that. That was from, a couple of years back, but those still exist today.
I was going to say, I think the bowling pins and such have been replaced with ping pong balls and hacky sacks, which I'm very excited to see a comeback as a child of the 90s. But
I can't wait to like blow out my ACL or whatever, trying to keep the hacky sack up. But yes.
Right. So on that note, actually, it's a perfect segue. Another huge part of what you do, besides this very important mission of making sure our boys are comfortable in the school, have people and resources at their fingertips. Another big thing that you do, and I will say, as I'm going to self-proclaim myself a prospective Rockhurst mom favorite, because the calls I get quite frequently, and I have some really great, meaningful conversation with prospective moms and some dads around really this worry, like, is my child going to meet people? Are they going to make friends? So you've talked a little bit about how the Cura program does that. But this other side of your job, which is a huge job, is to oversee our 45 different clubs and student organizations. And part of that freshman experience is the freshman club fair. So can you let the people at home know a little bit more about what that experience looks like?
Yeah, of course. The club life here is really important because we see it as just an extension of what's happening in the classroom in terms of learning about the world, learning about self, learning about interacting with others. What we see, say from an athletic standpoint as well with teams. But we're also trying to give students the opportunities to just develop interests outside of those two worlds in a variety. If we don't have a club that a student is interested in, they know to come talk to me, and we'll start figuring out how can we start that. Or if we think we can do a club stronger than we are, we'll talk about that. In our few minutes ago, our past conversation, we were talking about, like, we want to give students opportunity to grow. And it's almost like the secret sauce. I think sometimes I refer to our clubs as like the secret sauce, where we're giving a young man who has no prior experience in doing, I think of a name of a club that we do.
Culinary club.
Culinary club,
yeah.
I think is a great example, yeah. But because he just kind of either said yes to an announcement that invited him to it, or many times it's a friend, they just forms like, let's go check it out. Culinary club's a bad example too, though, because there's going to be food.
So that's always enticing.
For 99% of them, that's why they're going to that meeting, is they want to get some food. But what happens there is that they get to own that. It's their club. Yes, there's a moderator there who is going to support them and guide them, but most of our moderators are pretty clear about saying, no, students, you have to come up with the ideas. You have to figure out, how is this working? I'm going to kind of guide you along the way, but it's your club. We see a lot of strong friendships come out of that. We see a lot of exciting programming that affects the community comes out of the kind of spirit of the community, not just the rah-rah spirit, but just that sense of that community life. So we want freshmen to tap into that. One, we have to. We just graduated the seniors. We need people to step into their shoes, and we make that pretty clear to the freshmen. Like, this is not just an invite. Like, we're asking you, please, to get involved. That conversation is always happening. Many of the presenters at that spring freshman registration night I refer to, they're coming and talking about their club to try to excite the student into maybe looking into that club. Freshman Cura will early start talking about club. We understand freshmen need to have a few weeks to kind of get settled. There's a lot of adjustment that happens from middle school to high school. But then about 3 to 4 weeks into the school year, we do have the freshman club fair. This has been going on for decades as well. We fill up our largest gym, the Loyola gym, with typically about 50 different groups that are in there. That is kind of a wild show sometimes, because you might have the outdoors club in one corner with their tent set up and fly fishing. Across from them, we have the drone club that's flying drones. We have across from them the robotics that's driving around a robot that's shooting either T-shirts or rubber chickens at people as they walk by. And then you got the album club that's, headsets playing music and kind of chilling and listening to really, good music there for sure. And so forth and so forth. I call it gauntlet because you just walk up and down the rows with clubs on both sides as the freshmen kind of walk through it. And those are upperclassmen behind those tables trying to demonstrate, what the club is, but inviting them, please, if you're interested, if you want to know more, write your name down here. We'll put you on a list. We'll get information to you. Listen to us on the announcements when you hear we have a meeting. Some that might have social media pages, follow us on this way or that way. They really want to get the freshmen involved in that. And that's just an integral part of what we do in every early September, mid-September. And then we follow up by then saying, okay, coming October, what are we doing to see which freshmen are starting to follow up on that? Like which freshmen are actually doing something as opposed to just writing their names down on a piece of paper. And then that goes on all year. Would I like to think that like we're able to catch every freshman at the exact same time and like light that fire of engagement and commitment in a club? No, it doesn't work that way. You have to give that individual young man a time to adjust and define what really sinks in for him. And for some, it's immediate. For others, it might take some time. And yeah, it's a little bit challenging to have that patience and that sense of confidence that everything's going to work out in that regard in terms of getting engaged beyond just the classroom. But then our process is as the time goes by, we're kind of starting to look out, okay, who seems like he's not getting engaged in that way? And what can we do as the adults to step in? What can peers do to maybe kind of turn up that attention to try to lure that young man in?
Great. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Bosco, for joining us on what is a very busy planning week for you. So thank you again for your time and for visiting with us. Like Mr. Bosco noted, a little preview for next week's episode. I'm going to step back on the other side of the microphones and let Steve run things next week, because I'm going to be joined by my counterpart, Mr. Tyler Baker, our director of STEAM, to talk about the Camino project, which is that portfolio project that Mr. Bosco referred to, and fill you guys in a little bit about this exciting opportunity that is a 4-year formative experience for our young men. So be sure you turn in next week for Rock Talk. Thank you.